Alright guys, welcome back to Garage Denali. My name is Jonathan, and in this video I'm going to show you guys how to do the surround view retrofit on your BMW F3X. This is one of those modifications, one of those retrofits that I wanted to do since I got the car, since unfortunately my car did not have this option when I bought it. So I did a bunch of research on this and I decided that this was something that I wanted to retrofit. This is ultimately one of the big three retrofits that I wanted to do, and it's the last of the big three. The other two being the Apple CarPlay NBT Evo head unit and the full LED adaptive headlights, which I have videos on both of those topics if you go check out my channel. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to run the wiring, install the cameras in your car. The car that I have is a 2014 435i, so essentially a BMW F32. This retrofit should pretty much apply to everything in the F30 lineup, from the F30 sedan to the F31 Touring, F32 Coupe, F33 Convertible, F35 GT, F36 Grand Coupe, and it should also apply to the M cars as well, so F80 M3 sedan, F82, F83 M4, Coupe, and Convertible. There might be some slight variations in specific parts between the different chassis, so definitely check out realoem.com and make sure you cross-reference everything and make sure that you're getting the right parts for your specific car. In this video, I'm going to be working on an F32 Coupe, so all the part numbers I'm going to be listing real soon in the video you're going to see are for the F32 Coupe, but definitely make sure you're buying the right parts for your chassis if you want to take this on. Now, there's a few ways when doing this retrofit, especially when it comes to the wiring side of things, and I wanted to point these out. If you want to do it the super OEM way, you can buy the complete door wiring harness for each door. Now, each of these are going to set you back $180, so you're essentially going to be spending $360 on two door wiring harnesses, only to get one cable for each door. And that's basically the cable that runs from the mirror camera into the door wiring harness socket that goes into the door jamb. Your second option as far as wiring for the mirror cameras is to go on eBay and buy a 3-foot long or a 1 meter long HSD FACRA cable. So this is essentially just the cable that you need in order to run power and data from the mirror camera all the way into the door socket harness that lives inside the door jamb. So essentially you're only buying just the cable that you need for this retrofit, and you're saving money in that way. The only thing to note is that when you buy these cables on eBay, depending on the supplier and who's selling it to you, the pin layout might be slightly different than what is advertised in the picture. So the pin layout should be 14233241, but sometimes when you buy these cables, depending on who you buy it from, the pin layout might not be as described. So in order to get these eBay cables to work, you have to take the HSD cables that run through the car that go to the TRSVC module, and you're gonna have to do a little bit of fabricating, a little bit of shaving down one of the corners in order to get the connection to actually work so that you can get your cameras to work. You'll see more details on this in the video, but I just wanted to point it out that that's your second option that you can choose to go as far as this. Your third option as far as cables are to go on eBay and just buy used door wiring harness sets. So this is also an OEM approach, even though you're buying used parts. Although I will advise against doing this in the sense that what you're buying on eBay might be damaged or might be broken, and you're really just taking a gamble with used parts. So that's up to you if you want to be OEM, but you don't want to break the bank as well doing that. So I just wanted to let you guys know that there's really 3 ways on how to do this in terms of wiring. So you'll see more details in the video as to how to do this. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the parts list so you guys can get an idea of what's needed to pull off this retrofit. Before starting this DIY, go ahead and remove the negative terminal from the battery. It's only held on with a 10mm nut. And once you remove it, go ahead and place a towel so it doesn't make contact with the battery. Before you disconnect the battery, however, tilt both mirrors up and have both doors open, especially if your windows are frameless. So the next thing that you want to do is go ahead and remove the front bumper. The front bumper is held on at the top with a bunch of Torx T25 and T30 screws. Next, you want to remove the 8mm bolts that hold on the fender liner and peel it back so you can access the two long 8mm bolts that hold on the bumper to the fender. Lastly, there's a number of 8mm bolts that hold the bumper along the bottom, and you want to go ahead and remove all of these. After you do all that, slowly pull the front bumper forward from the car and be mindful of any PDC sensors you may have or headlight washer hoses. Once you remove the bumper, when you look inside, you'll notice two small crosshairs. The crosshair on the bottom is the one that we're going to be drilling through for the surround view camera. This is also going to line up perfectly with the mounting brackets that we have for the cameras. Using a small drill bit, gently press in the plastic to make a punch so that way the drill bit will not dance around as you initially drill through the bumper. Once you have your pilot hole drilled, go ahead and switch to your 18mm step drill bit. When I did this job, I didn't use a step drill bit because I couldn't find any of those at the hardware store, and I was eager to do the job, I'm not gonna lie. I used a spade drill bit, which ultimately made the holes far too big, and essentially it ruined the holes in the bumper. I'm not too worried about it though, since the bumper could already use a respray, and I'll just get a new one that already has the holes pre-drilled from the factory. You can also drill these two holes out using a Volkswagen parking sensor punch tool, which is 18mm and does the job perfectly fine as well. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Next, go ahead and grab your mounting brackets for your cameras. They are marked accordingly for whichever side they go on. Just look for the little letter between the two holes and determine which one goes where. You'll also notice that the camera is held onto the bracket with screws. Afterwards, what you want to do is go ahead and grab your bumper camera and install it into the mounting bracket. Keep in mind that the bumper cameras are different from the mirror cameras, so I'll leave a part number below. Go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. After you've done that, we're going to go ahead and run the two HSD cables for the cameras. I'll put a diagram up on the screen that shows which of the colored HSD cables go where. In order to run the HSD cables from under the hood through the interior, we're going to need to go through the firewall. Go ahead and remove the trim underneath the dashboard on the driver and passenger side in the footwell areas. These panels are only held in with two 10mm nuts. You also want to remove your door trim, as well as the trim that's covering up the FEM on the passenger side, as well as the trim with the hood release on the driver's side. Next, we're going to feed the HSD cables for the bumper cameras through the car. These are the cables with the white and the green connectors. In order to fish these through the firewall, you're going to need to remove the colored ends of the cables. All you have to do is lift upwards on the pink lock using a pick tool, and once you remove it, pull upwards on the tab, which ultimately will allow the plastic connector to slide off the cable. In the driver's side footwell, you'll see a big black rubber grommet with a wiring harness that passes right through it. To the right of that, you'll see two small holes stacked on top of one another. We're going to use a 1/4 inch drill bit to go through the top hole. After you drilled a hole through the grommet, take the end of the white cable that you took apart and fish it through the firewall. You want to start from under the hood. This part of the retrofit can be difficult, so use a long flathead screwdriver with a thin tip to push the cable through the grommet, using one of the square corners. You could even wrap the cable up with something long and fish it through the cabin from the interior. Once it's through, you can go ahead and wrap the cable in line with the factory wiring harness that goes through the engine bay and wrap it up in Tessa tape. There's a plastic cover here that you can also remove in order to more easily route the HSD cable for the camera when running it. Take some simple green or another degreaser and clean the wiring harness so when you wrap your cable up with Tessa tape, you can promote adhesion. The passenger side is the same story. Go inside the car and punch a hole through the upper of the small holes in the big rubber grommet, and then run the green cable through the hole from under the hood. Once you've fed the cable through, go ahead and route the cable throughout the engine bay, and make sure that you clean the factory wiring loom where you'll tape the cable. You want this to look super clean and OEM, so just take your time. Make sure you leave enough room near the front of the car so there's enough slack for the cable that will go into the camera for the bumper on both sides. Once you've done all that, go ahead and plug the cables into the cameras, and then you can go ahead and reinstall the front bumper. Plug anything you unplugged when removing it and reinstall it, since we're basically done at this point and we're going to be moving from under the hood to inside the car. The next step is to run the cables through the doors. So we have to remove the door panels. In order to do that, go ahead and pop off the door handle trim by pulling it off at the 2 slots. This will reveal 2 Torx T20 bolts. Once you remove them, you can carefully pull the door panel off the door. Just make sure you also remove the trim with the window switches as well before you remove the door panel fully from the door. Next is to pull the mirror glass from the mirror. This is why I said it earlier, it's a good idea to tilt the mirrors upwards before disconnecting the battery, since it's going to be a lot easier to pop the glass off this way. Once you go ahead and pull the mirror glass from the mirror, from the bottom edge of the mirror, go ahead and pop off the mirror cover by pinching the 6 clips that secure it to the mirror. The next step is to remove the small Torx T10 screws along the bottom of the mirror, which will release the turn signal. Remove the 3rd Torx screw from over here. The reason we're taking this apart is because we're going to be transplanting the LED turn signal strip from the old mirror bottom trim to the new one that has the hole for the camera. You can reuse the old trim if you want. All you'd have to do is drill out the hole, but honestly, these were cheap enough that I just decided to replace them anyway. This is what the finished product will look like with the camera in place. Go ahead and attach it to the mirror once you're done. Don't forget that the mirror camera also has 2 screws that hold it on. Once you put the bottom mirror trim back on, go ahead and reinstall the mirror glass. The next step is to remove the entire mirror from the door. Go ahead and remove the tweeter from the door. This is just held in with clips. Pull it away from the mirror and it'll pop right off. And remove the 3 Torx T30 screws. Once you remove the mirror from the car, go ahead and pull on the white plastic connector from the mirror. After that, we'll need to take off the bottom cap under the mirror in order to run the HSD cable from the mirror camera to the white plastic connector. In order to remove this connector, you'll need to remove the 2 cables from the connector, which are held on with small clips. Carefully unclip these to remove the white connector. Once the white plastic connector has been removed, go ahead and drill out the hole with a 1/4 inch drill bit. We need to do this in order to run the HSD cable into the white socket. Run the HSD cable through the mirror, and once it's through, you can attach the cable to the connector in the mirror. Go ahead and reattach the 2 smaller cables that you removed, and make sure to plug in the HSD cable into the camera. Put the insulation foam back on the mirror, as well as the small black circular cap on the bottom. At this point, you can go ahead and mount the mirror back to the car and tighten the 3 bolts. The next step is to remove the door harness from the body of the car. All you have to do is pull the tab upwards to unlock the harness from its socket. Use a small pick tool to start sliding the release. The reason why we're doing this is because we need to run the HSD cable through the door from the mirror to this door harness, which will continue into the body of the car. Now at this step, if you bought the aftermarket FACRA cables from eBay like how I did, you'll simply just run the cable through the rubber boot in the door, and then you'll run the cable through the door, and then you'll plug it into the backside of the mirror into that white connector. If you purchase the OEM door wiring harness, go ahead and swap over the entire harness, unplugging it from every point in the door, and then install the new harness. It's a direct swap with no modifications or fishing of wires needed. If you bought the eBay cables, in order to fish the cable through the grommet, go ahead and pop off the slider from the harness. You'll see a small square tab that you can press in with a pick tool to release the connector from the housing. This allows it to become loose so you can more easily run the HSD cable so that the 90-degree end will be the last thing to pass through the door. Once again, start with the straight end of the cable when going through the rubber grommet in the door. At this point, you can go ahead and reassemble the entire door panel since all the wiring that we needed to do is done. Once you've done that, go ahead and repeat the process on the other side of the car. Once you've done that, we're going to be running all the cables throughout the interior of the car and plugging them into the TRSVC module. To run the maroon cable from the driver's side of the car to the passenger side, go ahead and run the cable underneath the dash. Feel around for an opening where the cable can run through. It's pretty tight over there, but there's room for a cable to fit. Once the cable is passed through on the passenger side, look for the cable and pull it through. Go ahead and grab the green cable that's on the passenger side of the car and pull off the green plastic connector. We need to run this cable back to the driver's side of the car. So in order to do that, go ahead and tape the two cables that are underneath the dash together with about 4 feet of overlap. You want to do this so that when you pull the maroon cable back to the driver's side, the green cable will be brought over to the driver's side with enough leftover slack of maroon cable on the passenger side in order to pull it through, since that's where it needs to be. When everything is all said and done, the maroon cable will be on the passenger side since it needs to go into the door harness socket that lives behind the FEM. The green cable will be on the driver's side. Grab a Torx T20 and remove the bracket holding on the FEM to the car. There's another screw that holds the FEM to the car, so we're going to need to remove that as well. We only need to move the FEM forward without disconnecting anything, so you don't need to unplug anything. There's a socket inside of the door jamb that needs to be popped out. Go ahead and use a pick tool and gently push on the tab on the top of the socket and release it into the body of the car. You'll be able to grab this by reaching for it behind the FEM. Space is limited here, so you're going to have to bend your hand in funky ways in order to get to it, but it can be done. What you want to do is go ahead and grab the maroon cable that was fished under the dashboard and plug it into the socket that is mounted in the door jamb. There's a specific groove where this cable will fit. If you purchase the aftermarket HSD cables like how I did, you might have to shave down one of the corners for the maroon and the black HSD cables, since the pin layout of the aftermarket HSD cables that run through the doors sometimes don't match up depending on the cable manufacturer. In order to do this, you're going to need to rotate the cable 90 degrees counterclockwise and then use a Dremel to shave down the corner that will become the new keyed corner that goes into the door socket. You'll have to do this on the driver's side as well, so keep that in mind. Once you inserted the cable into the socket, go ahead and get it back into its slot in the door jamb. This part is a little tricky, but if you're careful and gentle, you can get it back in and then reattach the door harness. We need to do the same thing on the driver's side. So go ahead and find the silver TRSVC module and remove it by pressing on the black tab. This module is what we have for the backup camera, and we're going to swap it over for a new one, which will have all the channels for the other 4 cameras we're adding. The next thing is to reach inside the door jamb and get the socket pulled through. Go ahead and install the black HSD cable into the socket as we did on the passenger side. Again, you may have to Dremel the corner before inserting it into the socket if you purchase the aftermarket HSD cables. So just a quick side note, if you purchased the aftermarket HSD cables and ran them through the door, with regards to the black and the maroon HSD cables that plug into the sockets inside the door jamb,
What you can do is you can plug them in as if you purchased the OEM door harnesses, code the car, and then see if your mirror cameras are working just fine. If you see that one or both mirror cameras are not working, that right there will pretty much be a telltale sign that the pin layout is wrong and power and data are not being transmitted correctly through the cables. So what you're going to have to do then is pull out the red and the black HSD cables that go into the socket, rotate them counterclockwise by 90 degrees, and Dremel down the top right corner that will become the new chamfered edge that's going to match the keyed corner inside the socket. Once you plug everything back in, you can go ahead and retest, and then you can see if your mirror cameras are working. This is what I had to do in my case, and I just thought I'd let you guys know.
Once you're done that, go ahead and install the TRSVC module by plugging in the 5 camera channels into their respective locations and plug in the other connector. After that, you can go ahead and reinstall all your trim for your driver and passenger side footwell areas. After you do that, the next step is to replace the button panel next to the gear shifter. In order to do that, you'll need to remove the iDrive trim, which just pulls upwards. Once you've removed that, go ahead and use a small pick tool and pry up on the gear shifter trim in order to give yourself access to remove the button panel. The button panel is held in with 2 tabs, so just press them by feeling around inside the center console until it releases. You want to press the tabs inwards in order to release the button panel. Install the new button panel and then go ahead and then reassemble the center console area. The next step at this point is coding the surround view option. If you know how to do this, go ahead and open up eSys and code in the features. If you don't know how to do this or you don't feel confident doing it, find somebody online who's able to assist you with this. There's many coders who can connect to your computer remotely and code in the option for a small fee. Alright guys, here is the final product of what the Retrofit will look like. So first, we're going to take a look at the bumper camera in the bumper, and here you can see why it's important to use a step drill bit to get that perfect hole. Now we're going to move up to the camera in the mirror. You can see that this is pretty stealthy and it also looks very good. Now we're going to go and hop inside the car, and we're going to check out the modes that you can choose between surround view. So if we go down here and hit the camera button, it's going to bring up the cameras on both sides of the bumper, which gives you great visibility as to what's coming from either the left or right side. This is good if you're coming out of a tight street corner or if you're parked in the city and can't see if there's any cross traffic coming. Then if you hit the parking sensor button, you'll get a 270-degree view of your surroundings, and you can even toggle between that and the regular backup camera using the iDrive controller. It's pretty handy to have both camera modules accessible at just the touch of a button. Alright guys, so that right there is how you retrofit surround view on your BMW F3X. So as you saw in the video, this was a pretty involved DIY, but nonetheless you get nice added functionality, which I find useful and I think some of you guys will as well. There's a lot of information out there on how to do this retrofit, but I just wanted to make a video that shows you how to do this and help somebody out who might be looking to do this retrofit or is considering doing it. So as you can see, it's pretty involved, but really not that complicated. It's just a lot of steps, but if you take your time, you can do it and you can have working surround view. I wanted to do it because I'd like to have the added functionality of just by pressing the camera button, and then I can see if there's anybody coming, if I'm in a tight space and I can't see what's in front of me, or if I hit the parking sensor button, I can see how close I am to an obstacle on the left or the right side of the car, or if I'm parking in a tight space, like along the curb. If I'm street parking, for example, I can see just how close I am to the curb so I don't scratch up my rims, and that's something that we don't want to do as car enthusiasts. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Go ahead and leave a comment down below if you have any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. But go ahead and comment, rate, and subscribe. Check me out on Instagram at Denali. Thank you very much and take care.